In this video, we continue talking about shapes and graphics using ScalaFX. In particular, we're going to focus on two shapes that define curves. These are the quad curve and the cubic curve. So we have our little script here, which defines a number of shapes that we've already talked about. The quad curve and the cubic curve are both what are called Bezier curves, and for the quad curve we make one by specifying a start point and an end point as well as a control point. Now the control point isn't actually on the curve, however the curve is kind of drawn towards the control point. The full scope of talking about Bezier curves as a topic is well beyond what we're going to do in these videos, but we can kind of demonstrate a little bit about how they work. So let's make a val quad is a quad curve, and for the starting point, let's see, we should be up to, I believe, 310 in x, and we're still in the second row, so 110 in y. That's going to be my start point, and I'll add some extra commas. The end point for this will be 390 in x and 110 in y. The fact that it says quad means that this is a quadratic. It's going to use second order functions, or functions that have the parameter squared in them. So in other words, the shape's going to come out something like a parabola, basically. For the control curve, I want to set this to be in between those two in x, so 350, and then we'll start off by putting it at the bottom of that region. We'll add it to our contents, and then we can run this and see what that looks like. So that's the quadratic curve when the control point is basically down here where the tip of the mouse is. Okay. We can see how that is impacted by stretching it further down. So instead of 190, let's go down to 290 and see what happens to that particular shape. Now you can see it dips much further down because the control point has been pulled all the way down to where my mouse is now. And you can adjust that. What if I didn't center it? So what if I go back to the 190 but I go 310? So it's aligned with the first point and then further away from the second. Then we get something that's skewed off to the side here. So it's kind of being pulled towards this corner down here. Okay, so that's a quadratic curve, and you can play around with that. It can give you more flexibility for certain types of things than what any of these other shapes did. There is also a cubic curve. Now the cubic curve uses a cubic polynomial approximation. It is a bit different from all the others in that there is not an apply method in here for creating one. Instead, we actually have to set the values, and let's go ahead and take out all the things that aren't part of cubic curve. We have to set the start, the end, and then now there are two control values, a control x and y1 and a control x and y2, whereas the quadratic only had one control value. So if I want to add one of these in, val cubic equals, and because we're not using an apply method, we have to say new cubic curve, and I'm not going to give it any arguments here. It's just going to create one. Then I have to take that cubic and I need to set its start x value. We'll set that to be 410. We need to set its start y value, and I'm going to set that to 110. I need to set the end x and end y. And for that, I'm going to go to 490 and 190. And then in between, I need to set the two control points. And I could set them kind of in any order that I wanted, but the curve is kind of going to run from the start towards control 1, then towards control 2, and then back to the end. So I'm going to make control 1 control x1 be actually the same as the first point, but then the control y1 is going to be down at the base, and the second control point will be back up at the top, but aligned with the second point. Let's add cubic into our list of contents. Should probably go ahead and hit enter here. Okay. Let's try running that. And here's the cubic that is produced by that. So that's the start and that's the end. The first control point is down in this corner, and the second control point is up in that corner. So it starts heading towards the first control point, then gets pulled over towards the second one, and then hits the end. And as with before, you could put these in different locations. It's probably worth looking at what happens if I stretch these out further, again in the y direction. So I'm going to make, instead of 190 and 110, I'm going to go to 290 and 10. So we're pulling quite a bit further there. There should be kind of more of a curve to this, so it's getting pulled further down and then further up to form the curve here. Once again, it also does not have to be symmetric, so all of the things that I've been doing have been somewhat symmetric. We could have it so it's pulled more off to one side or the other. You can feel free to play around with the various control points and see what types of shapes you can make using these Bezier curves, but what give you the ability to do things. You will note that both of these for the shapes are filled in by default, and this one, because I've kind of made it a symmetric cubic, has the straight line going through. If I were to do something that's not a symmetric cubic, it might have all be on one side of the start and end point.